All right, let's get started. Chapter 5, gathering your material from the natural speaker, the ninth edition. So what you sow is what you reap. That tells us that what you put into research and getting evidence for your speech is basically what you're going to get out of it, right? So put the time and effort into, educate yourself on your topic, immerse yourself in your topic, and then you'll really, really be knowledgeable in it, which is provides credibility. And that'll kind of come through as the way you speak about your topic. So 5.1, let's look at what to look for. First, we start with definitions, the dictionary, and then also to like the internet, like urbandictionary.com. And one of the things you should always do in any speech when you have a topic is make sure you define it and make sure the audience knows exactly what you mean by that. Don't make assumptions. Like, I could talk about love, but do you mean platonic love, romantic, physical love, like it was Valentine's Day yesterday? Or are we talking about love of your country called patriotism, or love of your God, your religious love? And so make sure, even though you're doing a speech about love, you want to define love, right? So examples, provide lots of examples besides a definition, because it's kind of abstract. Examples can be detailed, factual, or hypothetical. I really like hypothetical examples, just because you put in yourself in an imaginary what if situation. Like, what would you do if you won the lottery, right? What would be one of the first things you would do? What would you do if you were starving to death? And like, could you cannibalize somebody? Like, it's like the Donner Party, during the gold rush almost 150 years ago, and you're hungry. And they always say like hunger causes madness, right? And people are no longer human beings when they're starving. And you can ask the audience to be in this imaginary hypothetical situation, or an example. Explanations. Those are analytical, or built on analysis, built on exposition, which is exposing something, right? Like usually criminal enterprises are hidden, or political corruption, or like George Santos, who's the New York congressman, who's been totally exposed as a liar. I think actually, when this is all over, he might become the meme picture for a liar for the next 100 years, just because if you know who I'm talking about. He got elected to Congress and they found out that everything he said is basically been a lie. So college, work experience, who he was. He said he was Jewish, but he's not, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So then you can also describe things, and that's also you might have done that when you're doing or you're about to do that when you do your impromptu speech, right? You really want to make sure you describe what you're talking about, and so the audience can picture what you're talking about, right? That's always that they say is the ideal description. So define things, provide some examples, whether they be detailed, factual, or example, hypothetical, and then provide explanations as well, right? This is where you kind of see you have the main point and you really have some subpoints now, right? About like what is the topic that I'm really, really going to try and push you on. So, and then fourth, we make comparisons. Comparisons kind of the spice of life. So there are figurative and literal ones. Figurative are you're kind of making some metaphorical association or comparison, and then literal is just saying you actually are this thing, right? So if I say you're a pig, figuratively, I might mean that you're messy or maybe big. But on a literal level, I might just say you have inky tail, smushed nose, and you like to roll in the mud, right? And contrast is really, really important. We helps again people in your audience to understand something. So like, what's the best hamburger? Well, you got to compare them, right? I mean, think about that. How would you really come up with the best hamburger if you didn't just compare In-N-Out to the Counter, to the Habit, to McDonald's, to Burger King, to Wendy's, to I could just there's so many burger places, right? Five Guys. And then you can have a much better understanding, I think, of what, or you can appreciate better what this best hamburger might be. And I have a quote here that says, "There's no such thing as a warm, cozy bed unless it's a cold, freezing night." And that's a quote from Herman Melville's Moby Dick, terrific book, by the way, if you ever want to read it. It's super intellectual. And this quote really tells you that you love your idea of your warm, cozy bed, right? Except for if it's a hot summer July night. You want your warm, cozy bed. You appreciate it when it's freezing outside, right? So contrast is really, really useful. I think in life, if you want to understand what you like in life, what you really do like, you have to compare it. So if kids say like, "Oh, my favorite food is ice cream," well, I might compare that to what about pizza? What about, and then they start realizing like, "Oh, I have a bunch of favorite foods now," right? Instead of just choosing one, because it gives them perspective. So you define things, provide a bunch of examples, provide us an explanation, and then make some comparisons, right? Make some comparisons. It is harder to get into Harvard. Actually, sorry, it's harder to get a job at Google than it is to get into Harvard, right? Just based on the number of applicants, acceptance rate at Harvard, then they look at number of applicants for Google, how many people are hired. And that's just an interesting comparison of some data, right? To give you some perspective. So Statistics. Every speech should have a statistic or two. Informative speech and persuasive speech should have maybe 2 or 3 statistics, right? So, but Mark Twain had a quote about statistics. He said, statistics never lie, but liars always use statistics, right? Or he also said there are lies, there are goddamn lies, and then there are statistics. So he was saying, be careful of numbers. They sound true, but they're kind of misleading, or they often are misleading, especially depending on who's using the statistic, right? So, but why should you should put them in your speech, because Americans love them, right? But limit yours to enough, 2 to 3, but avoid overkill. So you don't need 5 or 6 or 7, right? It's the data becomes overwhelming. So we want to use visual aids to enhance our statistics, bar graphs and pie charts, right? There's studies that say when people see 37%, like almost 1/3 of a pie going to something, they grasp that better than the raw number 37 out of 100, right? Especially if you're not really good at proportional percentage math. And so visual aids are terrific. So think about one bar graph or a pie chart of some sort in your speech, right? Where you've got a statistic. Make sure you cite the sources, by the way, that's at the bottom. So, and your statistics, accuracy matters. Make sure they're accurate. Don't assume they are. There's a lot of false data on the internet, right? Recency matters a lot too. I'm going to show you a website in just a second, usdebtclock.org. That is real time, right? So let's go check it out real quick. This is a real-time website, which is all the numbers are constantly changing. This is all our macroeconomic information. It's a terrific resource, by the way, if you just want to know what's going on in the US economy. Here's student loan debt, by the way, at $1.777 trillion. This is the biggest personal debt item, right? Here's the total personal debt item. So it's bigger than credit cards, which is at $1.2 trillion, right? So those are the types of personal debt that people have. So don't fall in the credit card debt. And student loan debt's a trap too. Biggest budget items, Medicare, Social Security, defense spending. So the Pentagon actually gets number 3 biggest budget item of the whole slice of the pie in American spending per year. And all this information comes from the Department of the Treasury and such. So it's really, really accurate. It just shows you that it's accurate and recent, literally real-time data, right? So let's go back to share. And make sure your statistics, again, make some comparisons, right? I saw that, you saw that. The top 3 budget items, so you can kind of compare them are, so number 1 is Medicare, number 2 is Social Security spending, number 3 was the Pentagon defense budget, right? So it just gives you an idea of like where we put our education is like 29th, just to give you some, perspective, even though it's like billions of dollars, right? Contrast is really, really good. Again, it ties into this comparison and contrast point in 5.1. So, and then verbally cite your sources, which we're going to do at the end of the chapter 5, Evans 3-step. We're going to learn how to cite our verbally cite our sources. You should be doing this a lot during your speech. Every time you have any definitions, examples, explanations, comparisons, statistics, and studies, any other data, right? And statista.com is a terrific resource for statistics, by the way. So you can, if you're especially, if you go to the website, you have to kind of pay for like the full access, but the basic public access shows you a lot of interesting data about a lot of different areas. Social media use is one that you can find out a lot of interesting statistics from. Expert testimony is also really, really important. We call these warrants. Like think about an arrest warrant, right? Like you should go and arrest this person that like everybody's on the look for them out. So, and the warrant is like, this is important. So experts rule the world, right? We trust experts more than laypersons. So if you're doing research on your topic, let's say it's marijuana legalization, the experts actually are doctors and scientists, not the growers or the users or the industry, right? It's just really, if you really want to know the experts and what it's going to do, if you like federally legalize marijuana, I talk to the doctors and the scientists, and they'll tell you number 1 side effect will be addiction. When we legalize alcohol and then we legalize tobacco, addiction for alcohol and nicotine, tobacco skyrocketed, right? Because they're available legally. So you're going to see marijuana addiction go up a lot if we did like a federal legalization of marijuana. And that's from talking to the experts or doing research on what the experts know about it. Okay, so when you do your research, think about who are the experts on my topic and make sure you go and look at their opinion on your topic, right? Should we raise the minimum wage? Well, what do the experts say, right? Should we legalize physician-assisted death or suicide? Let's ask the experts, ethics people, doctors, right, in that case. And then maybe even some of the patients, people who are in the terminally ill category that would want to maybe kill themselves, right? Commit and have a physician give you a prescription for a lethal injection, and then you do it yourself. That way it's suicide and the doctor's not guilty of murder. So if the doctor gives you the injection, they theoretically are criminally liable, right? So that's why we call it physician assisted death or suicide. It's you kill yourself, not the doctor just gives you a prescription, right? Okay, so visual aids. Pictures speak 1,000 words. This is why PowerPoint, Google Slides is so nice, right? Look at the photo there, over there. You can't explain that with words. You have to see it, right? So let's make sure all our extemporaneous speeches have some visual aids in them, right? And the slideshow is a terrific way to organize that. We learned earlier, or maybe we're about to learn, that PowerPoint has amazing organizational abilities, right? Slideshows do an amazing digital presentation is awesome. I used to do the easel with the big poster, a big like easel. You have to carry it around with you. And if it rained, all your visual aids got all messed up, right? And so, but it was real and touchable, and there was taste, touch, smell involved, a lot easier. But anyhow, so visual aids, there are a lot of them. Don't forget, the speaker themselves, you're a visual aid, right? You could dress up to be a scuba diver. I actually used to do a speech on self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, and I would wear my mask, my snorkel, and have my weight belts, my knife, my dry or wetsuit, boots, gloves, and a lot of the different amenities and gear and equipment, right? And then you can step people. It gives you a lot of credibility because you have it all and you're wearing it, and people can kind of see where it goes exactly. You can demonstrate things as you put, why do I put my knife here? Why do I have how do I walk in the water backwards? Because you have fins on, you can't walk forwards, things of that nature, right? And then there are models. Again, face-to-face speeches are great for those. They're three-dimensional. They can be miniatures. You can pass around them around. They can be touched, which involves the channel of touch. Chalkboards and whiteboards are great, but make sure they're a last resort. A prepared visual aid is always better, right? But for spontaneous stuff, you might want to make a diagram, or like in brainstorming, chalkboards or whiteboards are great. Photos, you can find a photo of anything you want on the internet, download it to your computer, save it as a .jpg, and there it is. Just there are visual aids for everything, and so I recommend it's easy, right? Doing visual aids research for your slideshow is very, very easy. Videos, I have an example here of a video of a shootout, and it just shows you that you can't explain the situation. This woman gets home invaded or robbed at night, and then she comes out with a gun. The other got bad guys out. There's three of them. They have guns, and you could click the link and watch it yourself. But it's pretty crazy. So nobody actually, you don't see anybody get shot, by the way. So you can click the video and watch it. It's just a great example of, it's 2 minutes. You can fast forward to just the important parts, because if I watch the video, I know exactly where to take it, so the audience understands what the vision, what they should see here, because you just can't explain that in words either. Brochures and handouts are great. Hold up the menu from your favorite boba tea place. I have a thank you card here for, what's this for, by the way? Oh yeah, actually, my friend's sister passed. My friend died, and his sister sent me a card because it was the 1-year anniversary of his death, and I know his sister pretty well too. She used to live in California, but now she lives in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. So, all right. Drawings are also good, especially art-related speeches, and then graphs and charts, again, great for statistics, bar graphs and pie charts. And doc gifs. There are doc gifs all over the internet. You can make your own gifs. I make gifs all the time. It's very useful visual aid because it's in motion and it's in a loop, so it's not a video file. It keeps it. It's relatively small, so it goes into a slideshow pretty easily, and it just repeats this, like, usually I think it's 28 frames in a loop over and over and over. And you can make them a little bigger now. I remember the original gifs were like that too. So, okay. So those are really, really terrific for certain, like you want to see a dance move or a speech about raves, and you see the GIF, and the repetition of it really lets you see and appreciate what's going on, right? Especially it might be in slow motion. My ski slideshow that I have as an example, I think linked during the persuasive speeches, has some slow motion GIFs. So you can really see and appreciate what the athlete is doing. Remember some tips about slideshows. Make sure they're easy to read, easy to follow, and they're simple, right? So simple and uncluttered, a big font for the text, right? And there's no reason to make your text small. You make it big and visible for the audience, right? Especially some of you are still failing to use full screen presentation mode. So your text is shrinked even more because, like I can see all the work edit mode. And so Yeah, full screen presentation mode, that's been talked about repeatedly. And you do get subtracted points for not using your basic presentation mode software so properly. Let's include lots of citations. So HTML links that are clickable in your slideshow that take you right to the original source where you got information, data, study, statistic, example, expert opinion. And let's also include lots of organizational tools in the slideshow to help the audience make sure we always understand that, where we are in the speech, because the speech is well organized, right? Make a PowerPoint is actually one of the most said phrase in any large organization or corporation. So learning how to make a good slideshow is actually a super useful skill in life. You're going to find it for many different purposes as you get older and start working in your career and having a personal life and a social life. So here's my tip about how the organizational skill and power of PowerPoint slideshows. So homicide detectives in cold cases, they've basically been taking murder cases that are unsolved. That's what a cold case is, from the 70s. And they've been putting them into PowerPoints and digitizing the evidence. And it was college interns, and they created PowerPoint presentations to provide a summary to detectives. And in 2 of the cases, they actually solved the murders, 1970s murder. What they realized is they had a lot of evidence, but if you organize it in a PowerPoint or a slideshow, they were able to connect dots that when you have just all over the place, it just didn't come together. So it shows you that you can solve murder because the evidence is in front of your face, but you don't see the connections, but you put it in a slideshow or a PowerPoint and it organizes it so well that you can now say, I've got evidence that actually, or a good lead now that I can pursue, and voila, 2 of the cold cases get solved. So there's no better. That's a pretty great anecdotal piece of evidence for like why you should always be using PowerPoint and slideshows whenever you can in speeches to help organize. You notice I always have the chapter heading at the top of my slideshow, right? There are a lot of things that we've done in the lecture slideshow that are organizational. And then again, if you look at the sample slideshows that are linked, informative speech thread, persuasive speech thread, and then the student sample speeches, video recordings, you can see all the different slideshows and templates that people have, and you can point out, especially some of the appreciate some of the organizational tools that put in there. So PowerPoint slides, be careful, it's very nice but causes problems. Summarize all of this. You have Murphy's Law going on, which is what can go wrong, will go wrong. You can't access your Google account. The internet's broken. You have a virus. So I actually have a printout of the slideshow on paper. It's in my bag, so it's slide per page. And so if I couldn't access my slideshow, I would just show the printed version in front of the camera and walk through it that way, right? So I'm prepared for what can go wrong. And then just, keep your slides brief, simple, consistent. So like template, color backgrounds, kind of consistent font, consistent, right? Keep it focused. People sometimes lose sight of what the purpose of the slideshow is for, right? Be prepared again for what can go wrong. Be flexible so you can just make quick edits, proofreads to the speech. Be ready for things to go wrong and for things to go right. And be forewarned. Think about all the things that anticipate what can go wrong and have a fix for it, right? Don't try and fix it spontaneously during your speech, and because a lot of people I just see panic. And then be generous, hand out materials and give information to the audience that they can take home, especially when you're in a face-to-face setting. So here's some tips though about visual aids in general. Devote time to the process. You've done research, you're accumulating a slideshow and putting in the visual aids. Go through it and make sure it looks good. You're going to see that the more time you put in, like what you sow is what you reap, really shows in the slideshow and then the speech and the time you also the way you practice with it. So make the visual aids large enough. Right? There's no reason to make them small. They're small, get rid of it. You need to make sure everyone can see them well, right? Make the visual aids simple, so not too many. Clutter, no myspace.com. Enough, 9 to 10, but not too many. So I don't need 20 or 30 or 40. 9 to 10 is great. You'll get maximum points if you have 10 visual aids. And visual aids don't have to be pictures in the slideshow. It could be a real item. Like I voted. I actually have my I voted sticker still. It's just you get this when you vote, right? Because I might do a speech about why you should register and then why you should vote, right? That might be a persuasive speech. I'd do a great little visual aid right here. Or I could wear it on my hat or jacket. Let's also keep the focus on you, the speaker, not the visual aids. Make sure you're nice and visible on the camera. It's not all about the slideshow. I actually think some of the best speeches I've seen is when people use the software and it's a split screen. Speaker on one side, slideshow on the other. And then they're even pointing, because they know that they're going to put the slideshow on this side of the screen. So if you're over here, if you point this way, you'll be pointing to the actual slides, right? So you can really, really like use the visual aids I've had speakers where they make a slideshow, but they don't even talk about the visual aids that are out there. They just, they just ignore it. They're just going through their speech and the text. But like when you have a visual aid there, point, use it, point it. Why is it there? What's the point of it? Maintain eye contact with the audience, which is the camera in this case. So don't look at the screen or the projector, look at the audience, right? And don't pass around any visual aids until the end. They're a distraction, becomes external noise. So cookies, the test scores, always pass out things at the end of the class or the end of the meeting. And then practice with your visual aids, get in sync. So make sure that you always have this slide showing when you're talking about this. And you'll see it sometimes that students just talk and they forget their slides. And then they're like, oh, whoops, click, 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 and they speed up, right? And just realize like you're not using your actual slides at all. You made them, and then you kind of just assumed that it would work, and then, or you didn't practice. And those are the things that, that happen that can tell a professor this, you didn't practice speech. And then usually when the speeches are really, really good, the students actually tell me, like, I practiced it like 4 or 5 times. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I could tell it was fantastic, right? So, and then don't forget, you're not just getting a better grade, but you will improve a lot as a public speaker if you just keep practicing that much as well. So 5.2, where to look for information for your speech. First of all, we start with our own experience and knowledge. We start here, but never end here, right? I have students that know a lot about their topic, and then they don't do any research. So they lose points on their speech because it's lacking information, like source citations, verbal source citations, and actual evidence, right? That versus just your personal opinion. I actually don't really care about your personal opinion as a public speaker, right? You want to have evidence that supports what you say, right? That's what a public speaker is. As a public speaker, you want to be credible, right? Anybody can go out there and say whatever, lies, misinformation, like George Santos again. So just talk about start with what you know, but you do more research to solidify and get background. So number 2, now we hit the library. Not even the internet yet. So databases are in the library. They're subscriber-only filtered data, and internet searches are often too broad, right? And if we go to dianza.edu/library, you can, as a student, when you're registered, you get access to all these subscriber-based databases, which are usually often filled with journals, which are peer-reviewed. Peer review, as you did one of the Dianza video literacy assignment, which, by the way, double check that in just a second. You saw that, you learned what peer review is, right? So peer review is a terrific way to get published. It's very rigorous. They background check everything you talk about in your article before it's published, right? And if enough peers say it's worthy of publishing, then it gets published. So peer review is the most arduous process of publishing, which means that the articles that come out in a journal that are published are usually top notch, right? And then internet searches are often too broad. So use the library databases, right? Superior research full of expert knowledge. Students who do research through the journals and the library always have superior speeches because they actually understand, I'm not just going to Google and get the first fact or statistic that pops up in my Google search. I'm actually going to go to, not even use Google, I'm going to use the subscriber-based databases that are full of journal peer-reviewed research. Now, third, we then hit the internet or electronic digital sources, but can we trust everything on the internet? No. Journals you can trust 100%. That doesn't mean they're always correct, right? Because one journal study in England is the first guy, Andrew Wakefield, who's a discredited medical doctor. He actually is the first one who said that vaccines can cause autism. And it was a total lie, and he got paid to say that, and that's why he lost his medical license, and he actually says he regrets that. But ever since a doctor, quote unquote, said that, you have the anti-vax crowds just taking that and run, right? So you can't trust everything. So be careful. Background search people. So, and then topics and authors and understand especially their political biases. A lot of sources have a political bias one way or the other. So Boolean operators. John Boole was the first guy to create the code for a search engine where he used, he added terms like and, or plus, or minus. And my example of this is if I type something in the chat, for example, if I search crypto plus, I don't have to search for cryptocurrency, crypto market, crypto finance, anything with crypto at the beginning as a syllable or I don't know, pronunciation. Yeah, I don't know what to call it. Precursor, I don't know. It comes up in my search, right? So, or you can do, just like fairies and Disney, right? And so Boolean operators were just those search typing things you can put in to help expand your search and make it more significant, like filtered and search and focused. Sorry. And then we evaluate sources, right? Now we come back to who are my sources? Are they experts? And do they have any biases and things of that nature? And generally, you can also go to resources like factcheck.org and also know your websites, because most people do research their websites. So what's a .edu, what's a .org, what's a .com, a .net, a .gov, and how trustworthy are those? So .com, .net could be anything. .gov, government, official good. .edu, related to a university, they kind of put their reputation on the line for what they put out there, so pretty trustworthy. And then .org is mostly trustworthy because it's nonprofits and groups like that, but they usually have some biases one way or the other as well. I mean, you can make the argument that everybody's biased in the world, so subjective, not objective, but that's another debate and discussion for another day. So and then interviewing is another way to get research. So you cite the source by just figuring out who you interview and on the date, right? And for example, you could interview my brother. He's a VP at Google in augmented reality. He's been there almost 16 years. And you can find out everything you want to know about Google, what it's like to work there, how to get hired, what's the promotion process, what's the review process like, what's salary, what are the benefits. There are a lot of them. It's not just like stock options and your salary, but Google offers a whole litany of benefits just because you're an employee there. And then also, what's the difference in a full-time employee and a contractor? What's their COVID policy, remote work policy? Right now, it's 2 days a week in the office, and then 3 days you can work remote, but you have to come in once a week, 1 or 2 days. So people are going back to Mountain View pretty regularly. Okay, so, and then if you didn't know, one of the things, Google actually started one of the first bus systems where buses pick up all the workers and drive them to the campus. And they found out the major incentive of that was not carpooling or saving money or anything like that. What they found out is that a lot of employees left Google because like, for example, they work in San Francisco or live in San Francisco and then drive to Mountain View every day. And after 5 or 6 years, you just got tired of that. And then, since you worked at Google, because, it's harder to get a job at Google than even get into Harvard, everybody would recruit you to leave Google, right? And then you're like, I don't want to do the commute, right? Even though I love working at Google, and so the bus system was a way to keep their employees, as opposed to any other. I heard one bus removed 50 cars from the highway, by the way. I think that's awesome. Buses are awesome. Private buses, they pay for all that too. So, okay. So how to record your research information, 5.3, right? We sift through the data, we choose the best because they're experts, that makes it the best. We prepare the citations, create HTML links. Remember, if you press enter or spacebar after copying and pasting an HTML link, it turns into a blue clickable link from the black standard text. And you practice speech a few times with the slideshow. You get synchronized and you make some edits and you proofread it and you're good to go. So 5.4, remember, we want to analyze the audience. We did that in chapter 4. We want to help the audience understand your evidence. So ask yourself, what's compelling? So when you're paraphrasing, when we get to the evidence 3 step, the third step is paraphrase the evidence, is talk about why it's compelling, right? Moves, like people's emotions. Things happen, and like I was reading about 20,000 people died in this earthquake in Syria and Turkey, and then more. It's just, that's compelling by itself. But you hear the stories of like someone who's buried in the rubble 7 days, who's rescued. That's compelling, right? You see that of all 20,000 people died, but you have this one story that just human drama and just says that moves me, right? Paraphrase in your own words, explain what the evidence does and means, right? A woman will earn a lot more money over the next 25 years than they have ever have in the history of this country or the world. And one of the things I think is interesting is, what does that mean in my own words? I think you're going to see women become financially independent, become more homeowners. Actually, during COVID, they were the #1 buyer. It wasn't families or male bachelors. It was actually single unmarried women were the biggest buyers during the pandemic in the real estate market. Women save money a lot better than guys do generally too. So, so in your own words, think about what kind of, future economy do we have? We're going to have more hair salons and nail places, by the way, right? Businesses that cater towards women, because women will have disposable income. Make comparisons. We talked about this repeatedly through chapter 4 and 5. Just statistical comparisons. The Moby Dick quote. There's no such thing as a warm, cozy bed unless it's a cold, freezing night. So some comparison statistics are awesome, great for for your evidence and relevance. Ask yourself, does the audience care about the statistic? So think about what Like when people die, that always gathers your attention. So think about if you're doing a persuasive speech, do people die as a result of this problem that we're not fixing in the status quo, right? And I think that's a great statistic. The money can be interesting, how many people are injured, and it's just ask yourself what's really, really relevant out of all the statistics, what's the most compelling? The evidence three steps. So page 104. This is actually how we verbally cite our sources. So every fact, quote, statistic that we find for our speech should be cited. And so there are three steps. So first is we cite the author, full name, so that way the audience can Google them. Who is this person? Who is Stephen Hawking? And then the source, the book, newspaper, magazine, website, whatever it might be, blog, interview, and then the date. That's usually the publishing date, or the day you look at it on the internet. Present the evidence. So give the audience the statistic, the expert testimony, or the quotation. And then third, restate the evidence in your own words. Paraphrase. What does this evidence mean? Right? In your own words. What's the relevance of it? Why is it compelling? What can be inferred from the evidence you just presented? And we do not use cite lists in PowerPoint, right? No cite lists at the end of your slide shows. Citations where you use evidence, and then verbal source citations, right? And verbal source citations are necessary. They avoid plagiarism, really huge. You can actually lose your college degree if you get caught plagiarizing. Boost the speaker's ethos. Actually, was a woman at USC. They took her degree away because they found out she plagiarized a bunch while she was getting her degree at USC. And she didn't get her tuition refund. And it boosts the speaker's ethos, your credibility and perception as more prepared, and thus you're more credible, right? So let's actually do the evidence three-step and come back here in just a second. So let's go find a share screen, and I'll go to usdebtclock.org again. Let's just go to another website here. Let's go to usatoday.com. Get an article here. Okay, so there we had this racist guy shoot up a supermarket, mostly in a black neighborhood, which is why they knew he was racist. And it happened in Buffalo, New York, and he's got sentenced to life in prison. I heard one of the victims try to jump the courtroom walls and beat him up, and the sheriff's deputy stopped him. But a lot of people were like, let him punch him once, right? So he pled guilty to a dozen charges, and this is him. He's young, by the way, right? Peyton Gendron. And then you saw that the victims' families and survivors spoke out. He apologized. Was briefly interrupted after a person lunged at him for killing her 72-year-old sister, Catherine Massey. So the officers restrained that person. And there was Tops Friendly Market. And so who is the author? Ndea Yancey Bragg from USA.com published February 15, 2023. Then I present the evidence, and then I paraphrase it. Just say, yeah, he pleaded guilty. He was definitely, the evidence was clear, and he admitted his crime and confessed to it. And now he'll be serving the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. So, okay. Yeah, young man with an assault weapon, right? Angry, racist young man. So you go back to the evidence three-step. Again, you see it. We cited the author, the source, and then the date. Present the evidence, and we state the evidence in your words. So if you do this 6, 7, 8 times per speech, extemporaneous speech, you're going to do really, really well grade-wise, because I know that means you did a ton of research, and then you're actually not plagiarizing and verbally citing your sources. So from a content level, that's almost maximum score. So preparing your speaking notes, I like to use index cards, 4x6, 3x5s, maybe have 5 or 6 of them if I need to write some notes down there, right? You can still gesture with them, and they don't block your face when you're looking at them. You can kind of hold them up so you still have good eye contact and look at your notes, as opposed to you have a paper and you're looking down. Or smart device notes are okay, but I also notice that people tend to focus on their smart device instead of the camera or the audience. So, and also then you don't gesture with one hand because you got to hold it steady. So I don't think it's ideal, but it's better than nothing. Digital presentation notes like a slideshow are terrific. And then a teleprompter is a machine that puts your entire speech up of word for word. We don't use that. We don't write manuscripts, nor do we memorize your speeches, nor do we use teleprompters. And then there's the no notes at all style, which is what I do. But I've been doing public speaking for 35 years, so I have a lot of experience, and I just memorize my outline, right? Because it's easy. intro, my name, thesis, preview my main points, have an intention getter, do this whatever order I want, move the main body, transition smoothly, go to the point 1, 2, and 3 with your subpoints, go to your conclusion. Again, restate your name, thesis, review my main points, and close strong. And I just have to remember my topic and my 3 main points, and I'm good to go. So that's how I do it. All right, that wraps up. Thanks a lot for listening. And chapter 6 will be next.